Hello, Minglaba to everyone. Let me try the sharing the screen quickly. And okay, and I will start. Oops. Okay, first of all, I would like to thank you very much for giving this opportunity to talk from the side of a policy people, not only tech community. And it was, I mean, I was following the presentations from the morning, and it's like fascinating how much is done in the sector and how much is to be done. And thank you very much for organizing this event as well. So, as was already said, my name is Svetlana Zens. I'm lead on digital rights program with the Myanmar Center for Responsible Business. I'm not, it's my second year in Myanmar, but before I used to work in Central Asia, Kyrgyzstan. I used to work in Brussels with UNICEF, have experience working with diplomatic missions and multilateral platforms as well. So have some years and years of working with classified information too, but not as ICT specialist, but as the policy specialist. And here you can see also the links to our Facebook account, our website, and my contacts as well, in case if you have any questions, in case you want to clarify something, or you're interested in knowing more about MCRB, or like about my expertise in the sector. I also would like to explain a bit more on MCRB. MCRB used to work in various directions on monitoring and providing recommendations to the various sectors, not only ICT sector, it's also mining, it's also environment, tourism, etc. But I would like to focus, of course, on ICT sector. So we provide recommendations and consultations to the government, to the business, to the civil society, to consultant companies, for example, if they interested on ICT sector. Several years ago, Myanmar Center for Responsible Business made a research on ICT sector, ICT sector-wide impact assessment report, which was done by MCRB and a couple of consultants, which combined in itself various issues, benefits, pluses, minuses of the sector in Myanmar. And I invite you to download this report. It has several languages, Myanmar, including, it also has a summary of the report, because a report initially is, I think it's more than 400 pages. So in case if you don't have that much time, you can have a summary. A part of it, we also provide recommendations, of course, on the legal frameworks, either to, either to government, either to the business, on, for example, the latest one we did on e-commerce with the focus on privacy and data protection. Of course, we did the recommendations on cyber policy and privacy and data protection as it is there. And another thing which we're proud of, together with other organizations like Pandi Amido FEM, we organized Myanmar Forum, Myanmar Digital Rights Forum, which is going to be fifth this year, where we discuss more issues on policies, research based on international experience, good case scenarios. We involve government into the dialogues, we involve business, we involve academia, civil society, tech industry, everyone who is interested into the policy and legal frameworks, always welcome there. And on this forum, we usually discuss the digital rights issues, which are like the main pillars of the digital rights. Are specifically, we're talking on Myanmar context, we're talking about access, we're talking about freedom of expression, and we're talking on privacy specifically and data protection. And we are also pointing the attention into the recipients of this data protection rights, because it's, well, I mean, we can say it's It can be government, it can be business sector, but mainly it's the civil society, which is also government and business sector, like basically all of us who are the have this great choice and benefit to experience digital rights in our life. But my focus on this presentation is more on privacy by design, which probably some of you already heard about and learned about too. The concept is not that new, but it seems that in the countries where there is no legal framework on privacy and data protection, it's important to remind on these principles. These principles, privacy by design, were actually made with collaboration of Dutch Data Protection Authority, Netherlands Organization for Applied Science, and with the lead of Anne Cavocan, who used to be Information and Privacy Commissioner of Ontario. So they kind of collected all the knowledge they had and provided these principles in order for us, people who are in tech sector, ICT sector, people in the policy or law forming could take these principles and kind of use them in order to build our behavior in the digital space, and also to build a certain, let's say, safeguards if there is no legal framework. And I would like to start with the first principle is that proactive, not reactive, preventive, sorry, not preventive. So this principle actually anticipates a lot in that. Basically, we have to pay attention when we checking this principle is that our infrastructure is built in that way that we kind of foreseen what is going to be if we make a digital platform, network, architecture or application work, and like how the users are going to use it, and so like what kind of issues are going to happen. So we have to think about like one step before we make this availability to masses. And also, for example, we have to think like how to prevent this data breaches in case if we collect a certain private information. Then the next principle is privacy by default. Of course, I mean, most of you don't need to get explained about that. It's obvious, but this is important that when we building something, I mean, when we creating a platform, application, or a certain network connection, we always have to think about this privacy by default, so that the user or individual in this case doesn't need to do something specially in order to make his or her privacy in like more secure. For instance, if I go to a certain, if I want to enter a certain platform, digital platform, I kind of don't need to think that I specifically for this platform, I need to switch this, I need to switch off that, I need to use VPN, and I have to go there only at 12 o'clock at night because there are like less users. Or like there's no monitoring of this. So it has to be in the system. So it has to be thought by the one who is in charge of building a certain platform or application and etc. Like not to burden the user or individual with more steps. Of course, again, which is very connected, that's privacy embedded into design. When we are creating IT infrastructure, and for our businesses, sometimes we also need to do a certain data exchange. We also need to exchange information. So we have to think that when we are designing something, we have to think that the privacy should be an important part there. We should not forget about that. And while thinking about like trying to put privacy into the, let's say, skeleton, we also have to think that functionality of the privacy should be also taken in place, and also we should not forget about the functionality, because for instance we put a lot of let's say, privacy features into the skeleton, and then we end up that certain features are not working because it's like only one person has an access to that data, or let's say there is a certain regulation which is not allowed us to do so. So all these items should be taken in consideration. The next one is the example of certain let's say, well, I don't want to call it as a bad example, but for instance, we all know this Myanmar application, and amazing opportunities you can have with using this application. Of course, it's engaging customers and it's engaging service provider. But there is a question here. For instance, it's basically an application which has like it's collecting points for how much you bought in a certain shop, and then you get the points, and then you can get awards, you can share that. But application wants, when you're registering, application wants your passport number, like, or your ID number. Like, for which reason does it want it? I mean, but application doesn't provide a clear justification and clear information, which actually I will be talking a bit later in the slides. Like, why do they need this number? I mean, if they don't have a proper security safeguards on that, I mean, while you building your platform or application, you have to think about that. Like, do you really need a certain points of private information on your platform, or in your, while you kind of exploiting your networks or something like that? The other one, of course, full functionality and positive sum, not zero sum. So here we, of course, have to think about win-win situation when we can accommodate privacy of our user or individual and the security. So when we have the situation that we have to make sure that private information is not leaking, when we have to make sure that all our policies are going together with the protecting the privacy. The same time, we also have to consider the security side, because security of a privacy is also important, same as a privacy to security. For example, Microsoft was mentioning several times that they like the privacy by design and they follow these principles, and specifically privacy and security part. One of the examples, again, the local example of the application, which has several levels of security. For example, there is level number 2, where you have to provide a certain information so you can go. There's level number 3 when there's like even more like personal interaction with the professional from the bank has to be done. However, application is securing the security part, but the technology which is using, and that's you can also see here the comments from one of the users, is used by a company which actually got a bit negative feedback of people, how it treats the data and privacy. So in this case, when it comes to your side, like when it comes to your service or build something in the digital space with the platforms and or applications, you also have to think to keep in mind that there are certain companies should be checked on how they follow the rule or how they balance the privacy and security. And of course, end-to-end security, lifecycle protection. Well, this is very interesting thing. For example, in some legal frameworks outside of ASEAN, they were mentioned that, let's say, the data which you can collect only for 3 months, and you can keep it only for 3 months, and afterwards you have to delete it and like forget about that. But in some countries, the problem with legislation is still exists, and sometimes it's not clear. For instance, now in Myanmar, we don't have this data protection, privacy and data protection law, which could clearly explain us what to do with the data which we collect usually. But we need to think about that. If we collect data, we have to provide the security of this data. So, and we have to say that if we collect this data for 1 month, we can provide the security of 1 month or 2 months, or as to the legal framework, as to the law of the certain country. And one of them, for instance, like one of the examples I would like to mention, it's like Google Map, for instance. As part of giving a clear explanation how long they're keeping the data, they also give you a choice that they might not collect this data. They also restrict somehow themselves to collecting your data. Like, for example, some of you already know this, that Google Map has this incognito mode. When your movements around the city or around the country are not recorded with Google Maps. The same feature was with Grab, but unfortunately for Myanmar Grab, I couldn't find information, but for the Vietnamese Grab, they also provide the information that you can actually have a feature that your the data, which is like how often you take in taxi, which time you take in, and who is taking, it also could be erased, and they don't need to keep this data for like forever. Another principle is visibility and transparency. Actually, principle which MCRB is really friend for, and we're really calling for visibility and transparency, not only ICT sector, it's for every company, including us. So it's always important to explain how you're using this data, what data you're collecting, even like with the privacy. I mean, with the private data, you know that there are certain points of a private data which is collected, like including name, date of birth, ethnicity, sometimes even like religious and etc. So anyway, this has to be identifying the privacy consent. And the same way should be also explained, how is this data going to be used, where is it going to be used. If you're sharing that with the third parties, it's recommended to identify those third parties which you're sharing with, because in case of a certain incident with a data breach, the individual at least would know where to ask the question in regards the data breach. And other principle, yes, I'm talking a bit too much, but please bear me a little bit of left. So respect for user privacy. Of course, it's not like, okay, we explained how we collect data, where do we send it, what we do, but at the same time, of course, it has to be user-centric. We also have to ask the user what the user feels like about the collecting, sharing, or not collecting personal data, and also has to increase the trust matter for the user by explaining the user and showing the user or individual that this private information is kept secure, that the certain measures are taken to make it secure. Of course, appropriate notice in terms of, like, for instance, if somebody's account was compromised and if we are owners of the platform or network somehow, we have to notify the user and explain that we saw that something wrong is happening, but please pay, like with your account, please pay attention and let us know if it's not you, or if something happening with your account which you usually never seen before. Like all this information should be done And in this case, also, it's good to give another example on Telegram Messenger. I mean, I'm not advertising this messenger, but taking account with the recent developments with WhatsApp and their privacy policy, Telegram and Signal becoming more and more popular, because this is applications which position themselves as that they respect the privacy of a user. They have a certain protocols in order to protect the user information and data, like, I mean, a part of not collecting a lot of data, a part of not keeping all the records, and not sharing encryption keys with a certain state institutions without legal order or like court order. So they try to be on the side of a user and protect the user and the individual privacy as they can as application. And this is it, and thank you very much. So if you want to learn more about the privacy by design principles, that's actually a longer presentation and longer course. I would be happy to give you more information on that. You can see my email, and if you have any questions, please welcome. Thank you very much.